All right. Well, hopefully this is all working. Hopefully everything is going to be queued up here. I'm waiting. I've got my audio set up here. Just going to do a quick audio check. And I can hear myself on the video, so that's good. Wow, and Dennis is like popped in first thing from West Virginia. So how you doing, Dennis? You are early to the party. And I am, as usual, a little late to the party. But I think I'm doing good. I think I've got everything queued up here. It's not easy to get always going on a Monday. I kind of have a routine, but not always. So, for those of you who are not on YouTube and don't see Dennis's comments, it's because he's on a different stream. So whatever stream you're on, there is a chat box on there. So if you want to throw questions, say hi, ask me something, make a comment, whatever, that is the appropriate location to do that. So hopefully you have found that option in there. And I don't constantly monitor the chat because it's hard to do that and work with tools and keep my fingers intact with my hands. But I do my best, so I will check the chats periodically and try to stay on top of that as best I can. Like I said, not always easy, but I do give it a try. Now, I actually put a new battery in my GoPro this weekend, and I'm going to try to turn this on and see if it's working. So I'm going to switch cameras here, see if camera 4 is working here. It is working, okay. My last battery it swelled up on me. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a little puffy on the sides. So it was probably getting scary and going to explode inside my camera, and I did not want that. So I actually got a new battery. I used to have a whole bunch. I don't know what happened to all my batteries for my GoPro. I had chargers and batteries, and I have no idea where they all went. But I'm going to be taking a 350-mile bike ride here later this month, and I'm going to need my GoPro batteries to be intact. So I ordered a new one and a charger and stuff. So hopefully that will solve my problem for the time being. Like I said, not great to have your GoPro battery explode inside of your camera. So I got this one out. It was kind of hard to get out. I had to really pull hard on it to get it out of there. So anyway, I did that this weekend. And what else did I do this weekend? Not a lot. It was really nice weather. But I didn't get to go out and enjoy it very much because I was dog sitting for my son. It happens. But I did manage to get out in the shop a bit. In fact, yesterday I spent probably the better part of 6 hours maybe just doing CNC work on the bases that I've been working on. And that was because I had a mix of things to do. I actually have one more CNC project to do. I actually have it set up over, well, I'm going to have it set up over on the machine back behind me. That's the CNC. You can see the screen. Which one? That one. There's the screen right there. And then the CNC machine is, probably if I go this way, it's easier to see, but that's the CNC machine right back there. And yes, I think CNC is real woodworking because you know what? It's just part of the cutting process, just like a table saw or anything else. It's just part of a process where I'm doing things to wood. So, you know, but there's always that debate, like guys who just do nothing but use hand tools and hand saws and stuff say, oh, table saws are not real woodworking and whatever. I don't really get involved in that debate because to me, if I'm doing stuff with wood and I'm making things out of wood, no matter what the mechanism is, it's still all woodworking to me, and that's what I like. And I like tools that make my life easier because you know what? I'm all about the finished product, and whatever helps me get a means to an end is, to me, what I'm going to use. And so I think CNCs are woodworking. Lasers, yeah, if you use a laser for doing woodworking stuff, cutting wood and things like that, sure, why not? It's a woodworking tool. Just like my table saw, my bandsaw, my joiner, my planer, my sanders, all those things. But I have hand planes and I have hand saws, and I try to mix everything in as needed, and I try to use the best tool for the job. And to me, I think that's probably the way I look at it is, it doesn't matter what tool I use, as long as I'm using the best tool for the job that I'm doing at that point in time for the task, that's the important thing to me. So if people want to have arguments over whether it's woodworking or not, I really could care less, because you know what? The people who buy my products don't care what tool I use. They care, does the product look great and does it serve their purpose? They don't care if I used a CNC machine to cut handles into a piece of wood like this. It has a handle in it. Look at that. See that handle right there? That is a beautiful handle right there. And I used to cut these with a router on my router table. And I wouldn't even attempt to do this with a hand tool because, well, I just don't possess that skill set. But you know what? When somebody buys this and it has this beautiful cut handle in it, they don't care how I made that handle. They just care that it's there and that it's functional and that it works. And that's one of the things I use the CNC for when I'm doing these things. When I'm making these bases, is I like I said, I used to do this on the router table, and I have a bit that scared the crap out of me because it was this big double helix kind of razor sharp crazy blade that was like as big as my finger and would spin at crazy speeds, and I would get chip out, and it was not the best solution. And I finally moved on to doing these. I figured out that I could do these on my CNC machine and do it really well and really efficiently, and I've never looked back because these things are awesome and I'm super happy with it. The other thing I did with the CNC this weekend was I carved logos, because that's something that I do. Let me find one that's really easy to see here. It's easier to see on a darker wood, I think. So I carved logos. I don't know if you can see it on this one, but I kind of turn it and I go close cam time. So there's a logo that I carved, and there we go. There's a nice view of it right there. So you can see that that is all carved with the CNC machine. So basically I came up with that design a while back. That is a very old Singer logo that is no longer trademark enforced. I looked that up on the, you can look up trademarks and such. Singer is still making things, but they have a different logo that they use now. They do not use this one. So this logo, even though it was registered in the 1800s and in early 1900s to maybe around 1950ish or so, I'm not sure exactly when this logo expired, but anyway, I use this one so that I don't get into problems with people saying that I'm stealing trademarks and such. So I just use that logo, and then I added the flourishes on the side because I just think it looks fancy. So that's my deal. But anyway, I cut these on the CNC. Now, I did not cut, I have 8 bases, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bases in process here. I did not cut logos on every single base. I like to leave some of them without, because not everybody wants a logo on their base. So I do that. And then the other thing, this walnut base that I'm making actually has a name carved in there. Sometimes I do a little different something. So that has a name carved in the bottom, and that's because I'm making this for a friend of mine he has his mother's sewing machine, but it needs a base. And he asked if I would make one, and I said absolutely, because he's like one of my best friends. So anyway, but he asked I think I had done that for a long time ago. Someone had asked me if I could make one for their grandmother's machine and have her name on there. And I did, so I still had the pattern and such. And so when he asked me if I could make a base, I asked him if he would like her name on it. And he said, yes, absolutely. So that's why I did that one. That one's not for sale in general. Actually, that one's not for sale at all because, like I said, you know, you do things for your friends. But the others are, and so I think I did 5 of them with logos and then 2 of them with no logo. And that gives me the option of, you know, having both. And like I said, not everybody wants a logo on theirs. Most people do because I make them for Singer machines, and most people love the logos. But on the chance that, pardon me, somebody doesn't want a logo, I don't want to, you know, not give everybody a chance to get the base that they want, or at least an option. So that's kind of how I do that. So I did logos, and the logos take a while. The logos are almost about a half an hour to carve for each one. So I set those up and get them centered and get it all lined up and done. And then I carve the logos. And then from there, I move on to the handles. The handles are made up from pairs. So I've got a pair right here I can show you. These are going to be on the side of the base. So this is 2 boards right here. And these will sit on the side of the base, and the handles will be at the bottom, so it gives you the ability to grip underneath and lift it up when you actually have like a 15-pound machine sitting in it. So the way that I do that is to carve a pocket out of the wood there, and I just showed you I showed you one handle, but when I'm carving it, what I'm doing, let me show you like this. I put it together, and I'll go to the other camera. So when I carve it, what I'm doing is I'm carving a pocket. This is called a pocket. So basically the CNC machine doesn't have any idea what it's carving. It just is following instructions. So I put the boards together like this so that it's basically like one board, right? It's like one board, and it carves this elliptical type pocket. Give you a better look there, out of the middle. When you separate these two, like this, well, now it becomes a handle. And the depth of this is very specific, because if you look at, I'll just show you one. So on the depth on these, I carved these to basically, this is 3/8 deep on this side. Now these boards are 0.75 inches or 3/4 of an inch. So I do 3/8 of an inch on this side. This side right now that has nothing on there, this whole side is going to get carved out for the base bottom. And it's going to be about 1/4 of an inch that's going to get carved away from this side of the piece of wood. And that leaves me about 1/8 of an inch between the bottom that's going to get carved out and this handle. And that 1/8 of an inch is very important, because you want to have a little bit of structure there. You don't want that to be wafer thin, so that are paper thin. You really want to have a little bit of thickness there just to support that middle part right there. So very specific in how deep I carve these, and it's based on the width of the wood and then how much I'm going to remove on this side for that, because I use a rabbeting bit that's a 1/4 inch rabbet bit, and it will cut right through here and leave me that little 1/8 inch strip between this side and this side. So that's kind of how I do that. But these things take about 7 minutes or so to cut. I have one that I will be doing for you all, just because everybody asked me, oh, can I see it? Krusty Customs over in Twitch. How you doing? Nice to see you. Thanks for stopping in. So anyway, I have this board right here that I'm going to be putting on the CNC machine and carving a pocket out of this, because everybody's like, oh, can we watch the CNC? CNC is really boring to watch most of the time. I have a dust shroud on it. Let me show you. Burp. There's my CNC machine. It's set up, but it honestly, when it's running, there's not much to see. I will carve this this one board out. I already have X's marked in the middle, so you can see that little pencil mark right here. This is my center point, and I just basically want to find out the point where I center my bit before I start carving. So I just draw a line from here and a line from here, and where they cross right in the middle, that is my center point. So I get that established before I go over to the CNC machine with it. And that allows me to center the bit on there and get things rolling. And so that's the first thing we'll tackle today. I'm going to go ahead and get that done, because I saved one. I could have done it. I did 3 more this morning. 3 of these handles this morning, and I was going to do the 4th one. I was like, well, I'll do one on stream. It's only 7 minutes, so if people want to see exactly how it works, I'll run through how it works, and then you'll see how the CNC works. Because it's not a long carve. This is actually a pretty quick carve, and this is cherry, so it's a really easy on the bit. Cherry cuts really well. So I'll do this one last one on the CNC machine this morning. And then after that, we're going to move on to the joinery for the bases. So I did not do any joinery, but these bases are assembled using something called a Rabbet Joint. And it's kind of similar to a half lap, except a half lap is where you cut half of the material away here and half here, and then you would put them together. So usually a half lap makes a joint that looks like this. We're going to use rabbet cuts, or a rabbet joint, which means that I'm going to cut away material from the ends of these, actually not, well, from the ends of the long boards, and then these boards will sit in there. So we're going to create a rabbet joint and then glue these into the rabbet joint. It's kind of a traditional method that was used on the older machine bases. And that's what I base mine on, is what the original bases were joined using. I could use miter joints, or I've done them with what have I used? Dovetails? Yeah, I've done dovetail joints. I've done box joints, finger joints, miter joints. Miter joints are easy, but then you have to cut splines to make them more stable, because you're just gluing end grain to end grain on a miter joint, and that doesn't necessarily hold real well. I mean, it can, but the splines give rigidity to the joints, so you can do it that way. So there's a bunch of different ways you can make the joinery for these, but I just use the traditional method, which is a rabbet joint. And so that's what we're going to be doing. And I cut those on the table saw. So when we get done with the CNC, I'm going to move over to the table saw and we will cut some rabbet joints. I also, if it's going to be a base that has a storage compartment, that means there's a divider between the large area for the machine and then a little storage compartment. So I usually have a board that slides in that separates those two spaces, and for that we'll cut a dado. A dado is basically it's not a through cut, when you cut a channel into your piece of wood, but it doesn't go all the way through, and that channel will accept another piece of wood into it. That's a dado. Which is cut the exact same way you make a rabbet. It's just a rabbet is on the end of a board, a dado is in the middle. There you go. Someone's car is beeping. I don't think it's my car. I hope it's not my car. Hang on a second. Beeping cars out here. Whose car is beeping? Not mine. Anyway, so the other thing is, I think a dado runs across the grain, whereas, and then you can cut a slot that actually is basically like a dado, but it runs with the grain, I think is what it is. Anyway. They're all terms, and are they really that important? Not necessarily. Not unless you're trying to explain it to somebody, which I'm trying to do. And so anyway, so I've got over here, I just showed you the one camera I've got over here. That is pointed at my CNC machine, and you can see those flat things on the bottom. Excuse me. Those are clamps for holding the workpiece in place. And the router head is actually on the right of the screen there. So it's kind of moved off to the side so that I can secure the wood in the clamps, and then it would move back to the center point. And just in case you're wondering, the little sticker that says "Suck It," I'm not being rude there. That's the name of the dust extractor. It's the company that makes the dust extractor is called Suck It. So, so I'm not being rude with my stickers. That's just the name of the company. And they do make dust extractors, so it's kind of fitting. I also have another camera set up here, which shows the software aspect of things. So if you want to see how I get from A to B to C, I can show you software-wise how that works too. So, hey, Flying Delta over on Twitch. Yeah, it is a great name. I was one of the things I loved about them. And they also, their dust extractors are really cool because, I'll pull it up here. So you can see, I know I'm walking in front of things, but their dust extractor it's a company that engineered this, and they 3D print all of this stuff. So this is all 3D printed, this cone right here, 3D printed, the base plate, the magnet holders, and then the slot things on the sides that these magnet holders go into. Now, obviously, they didn't 3D print the brush part, but yeah, they did a really good job on these. And the company that I bought my CNC machine from, which is Inventables, they have a dust collection system, but they were sold out and didn't have any in stock for, oh my God, I want to say at least 6 months from the time I bought my machine until they actually had them in stock. I found this company and they had theirs in stock for my machine, so I went ahead and bought it, and I have not looked back. This is a great setup. The only thing it doesn't have is a, you can see the hose back here. So the Inventables version actually has an arm that comes up, a metal arm that you can mount, and it'll hold your extractor hose above the system. I didn't really have that, so what I did, so this fits in here like this, and it fits into the machine like this. And all I did was I came up with a way to clamp my my dust collection hose to the side of my table right here, and it works. It holds it up above the machine, and the dust collector does its job. So yeah, it's a solution. I will tell you that if you have a CNC machine, you do not want to run it without a dust collector, because I was doing that for a little while, and they make a mess. Because if you ever used a router, it's a router, and it's just throwing dust everywhere. So the dust extractor is key for keeping the dust out of the air and off the tables and everything else. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and set this up since we're on the subject of CNC. And I'm going to go ahead and set this up. Like I said, I've already marked this, so once again I'll show you. I've marked the center point of this wood, so you can see the little pencil mark on there. Hopefully you can see that. There's a pencil mark right here where I just drew from each opposite corner, and where they meet, that's the center, and that's how I'm going to line this up. Let's go over to here, and I have this pretty tight, so I think I can do this in here. I've already done several, so what I like to do is if I'm doing multiples of the same thing, which is how I like to work because it's more efficient. If you're going to do one, you might as well do all of them, right? So I've set this up with a series of stop blocks, and I've got them in a position here so that you can see I put my wood down inside here, and it's pretty repeatable, so I don't have to keep setting up different stop blocks for every single set of these that I do. I can use one and then just take one out, put the next one in, and just make those cuts. So I try to be pretty efficient with this stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push these together, and these are on little slides here, and then I can tighten this down. But to make sure this really doesn't move, and it's against this edge here, but I've got this one up here that I can tighten with a screwdriver, and it's going right down the middle of the seam. So it's pressing down right here and just putting pressure right here. And then I've got another one right here. And my whole goal here is to just keep this from moving as it's getting cut. So I'm going to put pressure on that one. And this thing cannot budge. It is solid locked in. So that is the way I do that. Let me go ahead and let me switch back over to the other camera here, and I'm probably staying in front of you for a second, but hopefully not. So this is, focus, there we go. Let me zoom out just a little bit. It's a little tight. I'm going to out just a hair. There we go. It's a little tight. So this is kind of what it looks like with my software on here. Now, the down, I don't know if I call it a downfall. The one thing that some people don't like about this particular software is that it is web-based. This is the software that is included with my Inventables Xcarve, and some people don't like that because they're like, oh, well, what if your internet goes down or whatever else? And I'm like, well, if my internet's down, I probably have bigger problems, like my electricity's down, so I can't use it anyway because my internet is really reliable. But anyway, on the back of this computer that you're looking at right now, this is a computer screen. on the back of this computer is actually the computer that I use. I used to have a laptop, but now it's a little teeny computer that's mounted to the back of the monitor, and it has Wi-Fi, and it connects to my router, which is right on the other side of the wall. So it's pretty easy. And then I just use this, which is a little wireless keyboard, and that's how I control everything. But what you're looking at here is, let me go over here a little bit. So this little thing right there, that's the pocket we're going to carve. And it looks like it's off center. So if you're looking over here on this part of the screen right here, you'll see it's like, well, it's off to the side of the wood. All that is the placement for my XY axis. And because I like to use the center of my piece, like I like to use the center point of the carve as my starting point, so I can place it exactly where I want to. So this is a trick that I learned a while ago from, I don't know, somebody on YouTube, and it works well for me. It's not going to be carved in the center of or on the corner of my piece. It'll be carved in the middle. But this allows me to put the XY axis exactly where I want it to be. But if you look at this, if I click on this, this is my my pocket that's going to be carved, the shape. And if I click this little point right here, it's showing me where it's located. So my X and my Y are at the Z point, which means Z is this bottom corner. So right down here, right at that corner, right there is like the 0 point for the X and the Y. And that's why I do that. I center it right on there because I know where the center point is on my piece of wood, because if you remember, I drew those little X's on my piece of wood. So I know where that center point is. So that's why I center the piece on the XY as my 0 point, and I center my little X that I draw on the wood in the center so I can match those up. But anyway, on this right side over here, this just goes to show you how deep the carve is going to look. It just gives you a visual representation of what the carve will look like once it's done. Now, this is just 1/4 of it because the rest of it is off of the piece, so you can't really see it. But for my purposes, it works great. I can control the cut depth on here, so there's a little slider, but I can also go in and put an exact depth on here, and that's what I have. I have 0.375, which is 3/8 of an inch, because 1/8 of an inch is 0.125 inches. So 0.375 is 3/8 of an inch. And then, yeah, when I'm ready, I just go over here and I can click on the carve button. Now over here, I set the dimension of my wood. I set the bit type and then my cut settings. And then I'll go into carve. So this is where all the good stuff happens. And it asks me some questions. Each time you get ready to do this, it'll ask you questions so that you can kind of remind yourself to be set up for success here. So it makes sure that my wood is 0.75 inches and that I'm using cherry wood. So I confirm all that. And then it says, hey, is everything secure? Well, yeah, it is. So I confirm that. I'm confirming the bit that I'm using, which is a 1/4 inch down cut. So I will confirm that. And now it wants to know, I'm going to take the dust collection off here for a second, how I'm going to actually work with my 0 for the Z-axis. So the Z-axis is basically the point where the bit touches the wood. Wherever it touches the wood, so put my hand in here. So wherever that bit touches the wood, that point where it touches is the Z. So X and Y move, X and Y forward and backward and side to side, but the Z is the up down, right? So you want that Z, boop, just so it's touching the wood, and you want it to know exactly where that point in space is. One way to do that is by putting a piece of paper on top of your workpiece. And let me kind of, let's see, yeah. So you put a piece of paper on there and you lower the bit down till it just barely touches. So you lower the bit down till it just barely touches, and you can pull that piece of paper, but you have some rubbing where it's kind of squeezed between the bit and the wood. I don't like that. I use something called a Z probe. So the Z probe has a puck that looks like, I'm trying to get it on the thing here. So it has a little puck like this which is a known thickness, so the computer knows how thick this is. And I put this on my workpiece, and I move the, let me move the piece over here. Hang on a second. So I'm moving, right now I'm moving the bit. Let me go back over here so you can see. Oh, not that one, that one. So I'm moving the bit. It was over here. I'm just using the keyboard to move the bit over top of my work surface. I had this pretty much zeroed out anyway. But I'm just going to make sure it's right in the line with that mark, so it's right in the middle, and that looks like it is. So I'm going to raise this up. And then what I'll do is I put this puck right underneath where that bit is. And then I plug in. It's got a plug here that plugs into the top. And then it has a little alligator clip thing. And this clip clips onto the top up here. And what that does is it basically forms a circuit. So when this bit comes down, it touches this, and this is plugged in up here. So when it sees an electrical current being a circuit basically being completed from this clip right here going through the bit, touching this, as soon as it touches, that completes the circuit. It says, okay, that's my Z point. I lowered it down. It touched it right there. And then it raises it back up. So it doesn't keep trying to press through there. But the thing is, it knows how thick this puck is, and it calculates that into where the actual Z point, 0 point on the Z is. So I'm just going to say probe. It asks me more questions. Well, we'll just go back and I'll show you. So it asks me some questions here to set up the Z probe. It wants me to confirm the position. And then it automatically senses that the lead is plugged into the cartridge. Then it asks me if the clip is attached. It is, so I'll do that. Now what it wants me to do is raise this up, this puck, and touch. So I have to raise the puck up and touch the bit with it. And that way it can see that there is enough, that it's going to complete a circuit when it lowers down. So I'll touch it. Right now it says no contact. And then it went away because I touched it and it popped away, so it said it's good. And then I put the touch plate in place underneath where it needs to go. I'll go back to this camera so you can see. So when it's all said and done, I tell it to start probing. And you'll see it goes down. It lowers really slowly, but as soon as it makes contact, boom, it says, oh, that's the spot. It raises it back up, and that's basically it. Now my bit is 0 to the wood because, like I said, it knows how thick that puck is, so it adds that calculation in to find the 0 point. So we're pretty much ready to roll now. I'm going to put my dust cover back on here, maybe. Hang on a second. It takes 2 hands to do this because I want this to be covered like that. And switching back to, I'm going to switch back to here for a second. So you can see that now it wants to know if my Z probe is put away. So I'm going to say yes, it's put away. And it's going to ask me to set my X and Y axis. Now I've already determined the center point because remember we did that whole, it's 3/4 off the screen. Well, that's my X, Y, and I lined up that bit already to be at my X and Y 0 point. So all I have to do now, instead of normally you would run it all the way over to the corner piece of your wood, I don't do it that way. I do it this way because it's all set up. Set my X, Y, it's all done. And now it wants to go ahead and make the cut. So here's the deal. I'm going to do this. It's going to get quiet on your end because I have noise canceling software. And the noise canceling software will basically drown out because I'll have a router running and I'm going to have dust collection running. It gets really loud where I am, but my noise canceling is going to basically eliminate all that. So I haven't lost audio. It's just the noise canceling is going to take that down to 0 while it does this. So I'm going to go ahead and my dust collection is attached and my spindle, I will turn it on. So the last thing I have to do is hit this carve button. So I'm going to turn those things on. I'm going to put you back on the camera that you can see the carving. So kick back and watch for just a few minutes while we make ourselves some pockets in here. Hey, get up, because I'm in the shop. So I can't make your lunch, so you need to get moving. Okay? Have a good day, buddy. Okay, so that's pretty much it. You can see from here, it's like, hey, did you get a sad face or a happy face when you were done? So I usually say, I had a happy face, thank you very much, and then I close it and whatever. So yeah, we'll go back here. I can go in here and let me take the ears off. Oh, I don't need the ear protection now. So what I'm going to do at this point is, oh, my phone down too. I don't need that. I'm going to go in and remove the dust collection shroud from off of there because I don't need that at this point. And I'm going to raise the bit up. Why? Oh, shoot. Really? That's not the way you're supposed to be. Hang on, I did something goofy here. I was not 0, enter. Okay. I need to go into my movement thing here. There we go. And we're going to raise the bit. And then I'm going to move this over to the side just to get it out of the way. And then I can come in here and remove the clamps that were holding it in place. That one, and one over here. And then I just loosen this one. I really don't need to even worry about these anymore because that is pretty much the end of my carving. But when we look here, we can now see that there is a pocket carved in here, and that pocket, when we separate it, becomes 2 handles. And that's the end of that. So that's how that works. Not a lot of mystery to it, but like I said, it's not really exciting to watch, especially with the dust shroud on there. But the dust shroud does play a very important part in keeping this kind of a cleaner operation. I'm going to just, there's a little bit of fuzzies on here, but in general, I get a very clean pocket. I get a very nice clean cut from that. So you can see that that is a really nice clean. The bottom is very clean. The sides and the edges are super clean. And yeah, so that's pretty much the pockets right there, and that is how I do that. And it's a really easy way to do it. So that is my new go-to way for doing that. And that is all the CNC carving I need to do. That is the last of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sets that I've done. I did 3 this morning before stream. When I was having coffee or whatever, I just came out and popped them in. You can see it's pretty easy. Once you have it set up, it's pretty easy just to keep rotating them in. The biggest thing is just the time factor. It takes between 7 to 8 minutes to carve the pockets for the handles. And like I said, it's a half an hour for the carving of the logos. So yesterday was about 6 hours, maybe 5.5 to 6 hours of just basic carving and such. And really, technically, you shouldn't leave them alone when you're doing it. It's like, it's nice to set it up, but you shouldn't leave your CNC machine alone, because things can happen, bits can break, and if that happens, you're kind of out of luck and whatever. So I was just going to show you the bit that I use for doing the pockets is a 1/4 inch straight blade. It's basically a downcut spiral, and so it gives me a nice clean bottom and nice clean edges. The one that I use for doing the logo is a different bit altogether, and that is this crazy looking thing right here. So this conical thing, which actually has a razor blade kind of thing right on the tip here, and this is replaceable. Might even be sharpenable, if that's a word. But that allows me to get the really, really nice detail, and you can see how pointy and sharp that is. This is actually a 60-degree bit, and I'm trying to remember whose bit this is. This probably says on here, but I can't read it. Oh, this is an Amana Tools bit. That's what this is. So this is a really nice bit. I mean, it's not cheap. It's about 50 bucks for this bit, I think, $50 to $60, but the quality of the cut is amazing. I used to use, I'll show you the other bits that I have. Like I used to use other bits that look, well, that's not it. Hang on a second. Where is the other bit? I'm trying to find it. Yeah, so here's like I think this is a 60, but it's really small. It's like, it's okay. It's kind of got a carbide tip and stuff, but nowhere near as good as that Amana Tools bit. That Amana Tools bit is just awesome. So one thing I'm going to do is take my dust collector off of here, because I will need the dust collector for our next step, which is going to be over at the table saw. So I'm just going to put it over there anyway. And I'm just taking the dust collection and plugging it into the back of the table saw, because we are going to move over there next. I probably need to move some cameras around because, well, we're not going to be using the CNC machine anymore. So let me go over to camera 3 here and put that over on my table saw, so we have something to look at over here. Zoom way out. There we go. That is a good view, I think, right there. Okay. And that way you can kind of watch what we're going to do. I'm going to just move a couple little things around here. But we are in good shape now. So I think I've got, there we go. So there's a camera set up, and that gives you a nice view of the table saw. And that kind of takes us into our next step. Hang on a second. I'm going to shut down my CNC machine here because I don't need it any longer, and no sense in using power that I don't need. So I turn that off. This is a very loud fan that runs on there. Now, I've got all these things here that I do not need. I do not need this big gripper. I use that for some other stuff that we did, but I don't need it for here. I was looking for those scissors. And I'm just going to do a little housekeeping. I do not need the feather board. And I do not need this. So let me get this off here, and we will we will get set up for our next step, which is doing our joinery. Oops, it's this one. So we're going to do some joinery, and that means that we have to make some cuts. And let me get all this stuff out of here. Now, I think there's one tool that I'm going to want to get, which is my saddle marker. So I'm going to grab that out of the tool drawer while I'm in here. What is it? 77 degrees in the shop today. Not too bad. It's supposed to get warm today, but it has been a little bit nicer as of recent. So I'm going to get my little saddle marker here just in case I need it. This is great for carrying lines over from, so like if I needed to mark a line on this side, but I had a line here, I would put this on here, line it up, and I can make the line here, but I can also have it continue over. So really great, useful tool. This came from Japan, and I have no idea what it's called because I don't read Japanese. All right, we also need, we're gonna need this, because this is how we're going to basically create our rabbet bits. We don't do this with the router table. A lot of the rabbet cuts that I use a bit for that. I actually have bits called rabbeting bits. But for this joinery, we're not using any of those bits. We are going to use the table saw, and we're going to use my miter gauge right here. So we will use that. This is the miter that came with, it's Delta on here. This is the one that came with the saw, with the table saw, and then I added this piece of oak onto it just as a backer board, and to allow me to have more leverage when you pushing long boards through the saw. Let me grab a base right here. Actually, you know the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to clean my table off. It's really dusty, and since I'm going to be running that miter gauge through the slot, the miter slot, it needs to be a little cleaner so it runs smoothly. All right. It just takes a moment to clean up the dust and dirt, but it does make a difference. Okay. Now I need to set up my saw height right here, and this is where I'm going to use one of these scraps of wood that I have from an offcut, and I need to set my height so that I am getting a 1/2 inch cut. These are 3/4 of an inch thick. I need 1/4 of an inch of wood that's not cut, and I need to remove 3/4 of an inch, or 1/2 of an inch. That's where it is, 1/2 an inch. Now to do that, I need another tool. I always need more tools. So I'm going to get my Craig tool out here if I can find it. I think I used it the other day, and I put it back in the drawer here. I did. Here it is. So I use my my market tool. Is that what it's called? My multi-mark. Right here. This is my multi-mark, and I'm just going to set this. It basically has a little brass screw and a sliding scale that I can move up and down. And I'm going to set this to 1/2 an inch so that you can see now there's a 1/2 an inch that sticks out from here. And I'm going to use that to set up my height on my blade and get it close. And then I will check the measurement. I'm going to run this piece of wood through and check to make sure that I'm getting a 1/2 an inch of thickness cut off of there. And this is all part of the process for, oops, I have a, these we tightened up a little bit. There we go. Get in there. All right, there we go. So this is all part of making those rabbet cuts. And what I will do is pass this through the blade, and then I will check the depth of that cut and make sure it's exactly what we need it to be. I need to come over here and grab some power off of my router from the CNC that I no longer need to be using. So we will bring the power cable over here and plug my table saw in. And then we'll do a test cut, like I said, just to check the depth of cut before we move on to actually cutting our boards. All right, what do I need here? I need my ears. I need my remote. I'll get my remote. So there's my remote for my dust collection. And I'm just going to make one quick pass here and see how deep that blade is really set. So we're just going to run like this, run through, make the cut, and then measure. So really quick. That's pretty much all there is to it. Now what it did was it left a little bit of a ledge right here. So you can see that little bit of a lip right there. And I'm going to use my market and see if I'm on there. I'm actually just a little high or a little too deep. Just a tiny bit, like maybe a 64th of an inch or so. But you know, we want to be exact here, so I'm going to lower this down just a tiny bit. I'm going to make another cut. I might make this one a little deeper here. All right, so we're going to make another cut here, and we're going to see if I'm a little bit closer this time. So now I will check that new cut, and that one is perfect now. So that is my new cut depth. So we've got that set, which is good because we're going to need to use that a lot because that's how we do these cuts. And then I'm going to grab my first set of boards here. So here's our first set of boards. Let me turn that camera a little bit. It's kind of not exactly where it needs to be, is it? Let's go over here. There we go. That's a little better. All right. So the way this works is I'm going to make those 1/2 inch cuts into the what is basically the front of the base and the back of the base. Okay. So these are my two pieces right here. I'm going to make the cuts on the inside. So I need to know, first of all, what is the outside face? And I have those marked. So this one obviously has the logo on there. So I know that's an outside face. And I know that it sits just like that. This one, I put a letter B on there. So I know that this is the back. And it also has some rough edges right here. Those rough edges will be removed when we go to put the bottom in. So I'm not worried about those. It actually will work out perfectly. So we're going to need to cut this way and this way. We want those outside faces up. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove a 1/2 inch of wood, the total thickness of one of these edges right here. So it's going to be this thick, but only 1/2 inch. So the way I do that is I take the board that's going to go on the side, I put it right here, and then I draw a line with my pencil like this. And then I usually just kind of fill in this top here as the area that's not going to get cut. I draw another line here, and then I use my pencil to just kind of draw marks here. So I know what wood, hopefully you can see that. So you can see what wood is being removed from this corner right down here. I'm going to remove the same amount of wood over here. This has some fuzzies on it, so hang on a second. I want the fuzzes removed because I don't want it to interfere with my measurement. So I'm just going to remove some of the, I just have my little sanding block right here. I'm just removing the fuzz, which is just left over from a saw cut. This one has a little bit too, because we want these to run straight through the saw. All right, so now the problem is I marked this one, which is great. When I'm pushing this through, I can see those marks as they come up to the saw blade, and I can make the proper cut. Problem is when I go to make the one on this side, well, I'm not going to be sliding it through like this. I'm going to turn it around. So I need to make sure that I'm going to get my measurement on this side as well. So I need to make that measurement kind of flip-flop from the other side. And then I'm going to draw that in here. And I don't know if that's 1/4 of an inch. It's just approximate. It's just a visual indicator to me as to where my cuts need to go. So I'm going to have a cut on this side and a cut on this side. And I always want the face up. If I don't, it's going to be messed up. So I've got that one measured. I'm going to go ahead and do this one as well. And I'm going to measure off. And like I said, I'm just using, this is one of the side boards. That's how thick it needs to be. So I'm using that as basically my measurement tool. So I can get these already marked up here. It's just easier for me. And then I'm going to run it through this way. So I need to make my mark over here. I've done a lot of these, so I kind of am used to doing it this way. When I first started, I've made more mistakes doing these things. I've done rabbets on each side of the board and screwed. I mean, I've totally demolished entire projects because I was doing it wrong. And it's just a matter of time that now I kind of have it down to where it's more habit than anything else, but it wasn't always that way. So I try to be really careful when doing this stuff. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this thing through and keep moving this board over as I make little cuts coming through here. See, here's where those little fuzzy things kind of get in the way because they catch on my edges over here. So I want to make sure it's fuzz free so it slides easily. But I will make a cut and then I'll slide it over, make another cut, and keep doing that until I get up to my edge of my line that I just drew. I will try to get exactly to that line. And as I make that cut, I will take this end piece and measure it, and I'll show you that as we go. But anyway, let's go ahead and make this first cut here, this first rabbet bit, not rabbet bit, rabbet joint, and then I'll show you how that all works. Okay, so that is the first, and you can see that is basically a rabbet. This little ledge right here is called a rabbet. This end piece will sit inside that ledge like this. So let me turn around this way so you can see how that works. So this rabbet, this end piece, they will fit together like this. And that is basically my joint. They will get glued on both surfaces. So there'll be glue here and there will be glue here. So both of these get glue and then the whole thing gets clamped together. You can see how it comes together on the end. So I actually have about 1/4 of an inch of wood sticking out on this side. I've got that 1/2 inch of wood is being filled by the board right here. And that's why I cut it the way I do. Now, the other thing I want to see is that this actually has a tiny bit of length on here. So when I cut this, and I cut it this, well, I was cutting it this way, right? So I cut it just a little deep because I like it to be just a tiny bit what I call proud. So as you run your finger across the board, you can just feel this piece sticking out a little further. And I like to, I'd rather have it that way because then I can always take this down with a hand plane and make it flush. Trying to make the whole piece flush to this end is a lot harder. So I'd rather go a little tiny bit too deep, and by tiny bit I mean like a 1/64 of an inch. I'd rather go a tiny bit too deep and then clean it up with a hand plane. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take it, we just cut this one. Remember, keeping that face up, we're gonna flip it. Here's our marks that we made before. And now we're just going to do the same thing on this side. And once I get done with this one, I will move on to the other long board, which is right here, and get that one cut. So let's go ahead and start this one off. Okay, that is, in essence, how I cut these. So you notice now that there is a rabbet in this end and in this end. This is the interior of the base. There is a rabbet on this side and this side. Those also on the interior. And then my sides, the way this will work, bring it down here, is I've got one side here with a handle that will face out. Okay, and then that fits in there. I've got another here with the handle facing out. That will fit in here. And there you have, I mean, and this whole thing gets glued and clamped, but that's basically the base right there. That is how it works in terms of joinery. It's not super complicated. These cuts are not always perfect. I do have a flathead on here, so basically the teeth of this blade has two canted teeth, so one goes this way, one goes this way, but then it has a flat tooth on top, so it does give me a fairly flat cut up here. Instead, some blades, if you look, if they only have canted teeth, you'll get like a little V notch in between each slice. That's not the case with this one. It does have a flat blade head, so it does flatten these out, and it gives me a pretty nice tight fit there. I like that there is a little bit of grooving in here from this blade. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's not perfect in there. But that actually, to me, is just more glue surface to work with. It's kind of like roughing up your surface to get a better bond. So it works pretty well. People have asked me why I don't just use a dado. I have a dado stack. I have a very, very nice dado stack that I could pull out and I could use for this kind of work. The problem with the dado stack is, to me, it's twofold. One is that this piece right here needs it's a little high right there. The dado stack is much harder to get a precise edge because I like to work this in. So it makes a big giant cut. The amount of time it takes to even set the dado stack up is kind of prohibitive because it just takes a while to set that thing up and get the exact spacing and size that you need for it, because you have to use all these shims and stuff to get the exact width that you want. So I just find that, and then you have to set up a board here as a guide for how far you want it to go, and then there's a lot of stuff to using that. So to me, it's not a great setup. Let me make sure this is loose. Now this is a router plane, and if I have any little high parts on here, what I can do is set this up so that it is just to the depth I need, and then I will use this board over here as a side piece here, and I can just plane off any high edges that I have here. So I can just plane these off, hopefully. There we go. So if I have any little high bits on here that just, for whatever reason, I didn't have enough pressure on the bit as I was, or on the blade, you know, as I was pushing down and running across. But this seems to be okay. Not bad. I took a little bit off there and flattened that out. And there's just a tiny bit. Hang on a second. I'm going to see if I can do it from this. There we go. So I'm going to try to just clean this little bit off here. And just clean that edge. Because even though if there are some small ridges, I still want it to be flat. I don't want it to be like, I don't want it to have high spots on there. So ridges are okay, but high spots are not. So that is much better. And it didn't change it any, it just knocked off a couple of the high spots. And I could check it on both sides if I wanted to, but I think this is pretty good. I think that's pretty good right there for this one. Let me check this one for high spots. And this one feels really good too. So this one's done in terms of joinery. And really that's the process. I go through and I will do this for every single one of these. I will use the wood that is going to be in the, it's going to be the end pockets or the side pieces for them, to make sure that I'm measuring how deep to make these cuts using the same wood that will be glued in, so that I'm not getting some weird funky measurement. This one right here, you notice has some spots on here. So this wood, very strange, but this is oak, and it obviously there were some, it was a little bit of a wormy oak. So there's little pinhole things in here. So I was just experimenting with this piece right here. I did some wood putty on here just to see if I could fill those little spot holes, which I was able to. So I'll probably go back to the rest of this thing once I get it ready and fill the rest of the holes here. But anyway, I did a pretty good job. But once again, I've got a letter B on here, so I know that this is my back, right? Oh. You need to make sure this is flat when you're putting it through here. So this is my back piece. This is my front piece because it has a logo. So I know that's my front piece. We put the face sides up, and then we start figuring out where these cuts go. So this one right here, and find my pencil. And like I said, just getting my visual marks here. So I rotate it. This is probably the most important part of this process up to this point, because I need to make sure that I'm cutting these rabbet slots on the correct side of the wood. If I'm not, it's just basically ruined. So there's no way to fix it beyond this point. So once I get these joints done, it's a little bit easier to breathe. I always get a little nervous here. I get nervous because I've screwed them up. So screwing them up will definitely make you a little bit more nervous. All right, I have them all marked. It's my face up here. Put it in here, and we're just gonna commence with this one. I'm gonna do like 3 of these. And then, because here's the thing, I have to do them, then we have to sand them before we can glue them. Because I do the interior sanding because it's just too hard to do once the box is assembled. So I do interior sanding, not perfect sanding, just down to an acceptable level. And then we will go ahead and do some glue up on these. But I'm not going to do all of them because that will take a long time. So we'll do a sample so that you can see the process though. Okay, and I like to, after I finish each one, I just like to take the base and kind of make sure that I've got it all worked out here so that all the pieces should be pretty well lined up and I can see how they fit. And we look pretty good here. So that looks good. Okay, so that, take these pieces over here, and now we'll do one more. And we're moving up to the full-size bases now. So these get a little more complicated. We're going to do the same cuts that we did, excuse me, same cuts we did last time on those previous two, but we have to add a step in because we are going to create a dado cut. Remember, a dado is just basically the same thing that we're doing here, this groove, but a dado goes through the middle of the wood instead of on the end. The rabbet goes on the end, the dado goes in the middle, or somewhere in the middle. So we're going to have to cut one of those. But, and also these are a lot longer. I mean, this is a 21-inch piece of wood. So our, it's kind of like our workspace is a little bit more cramped. I do not need this middle piece at the moment, but I will need it eventually. So what I want to do is face up, right? I'm going to mark these, and same way we did the last one. So I'm using the end pieces to mark my depth. And this is how we do all of them. So like I said, this is very similar to the last one, but there is a little bit of a change to this when we get down to the end of it. My dogs are upstairs running around being crazy. I can hear them through the floor. They wrestle. They're kind of crazy that way sometimes. Okay. Get that marked up. It's hard to see. It's the only problem with the walnut. Okay. Got this one done, and I need to get this one marked the same way. I should have a face mark on here somewhere. Did I not mark the face on this one? I have not. So I need to figure out which is my back. I'm going to make this the back. I'm going to put a big B on here. Just going to do it over and over again because it's easier to see. There we go. All right, so I know where my face is. And this has some really pretty crotch grain and stuff in here. You can see a little bit of feathering and stuff in here. It's kind of pretty. So I'll have that on the outside, which is a little prettier than the inside piece. But anyway, let's get these marked. And then I'll show you how I have to do the interior dado because it's a little bit different. I have to do that with a ruler, and we will get these all set up for that piece. So rotate it, turn, flat, mark it. Once we finish this cut, all right, I'll just keep this over here. We'll start cutting on this one. Okay, let's go ahead and get these cut, and then I'll show you how we do the interior dado. Because like I said, a little bit different process, and it's one of the most important parts of this long base is that interior dado cut. Oh, not good. It's good. Ah! Okay, so we have now cut the rabbets for the end pieces on both of these. And you can see them, they're both cut now, right? But now we need to figure out how this is gonna work. So I've got my back piece with the back facing you, and there's my front piece with the logo facing out and towards me. And I'm gonna put them against the end piece here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure out the space that I need for my actual sewing machine to fit inside here. That's where this piece is going to actually fill in. We're going to determine how much space we need here, and then the leftover space is what will be the side compartment. But this is a critical measurement because if I get it wrong, well, the sewing machine won't fit in the base, which means it's useless. So in order to do that, I have to look at my little guide over here and it tells me it's 14.75 inches from this edge right here, which is where we made our cut. So right here, this edge, I need to measure 14.75 inches, and that's where this middle piece will go. So to do that, I'm going to get my, I'm going to get my square here. I'm going to get my ruler, and we're going to measure, I'm going to put this right in the middle here, and I'm going to measure 14.75 inches and make a mark. Because like I said, this is the critical part right here. 14.75. And then the other thing is, because we're going to be flipping these things over, well, I need that mark to be on this side, not this side. So I'm going to flip this over once again, but I already have my mark here, so that's fine. So what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll put it right on the edge of that mark. And I'm just gonna draw out the line here. And that is my leftmost edge, if you will. But now to get the proper thickness, I take the actual board that will be that middle board. I put that on here and I use that as my thickness guide. That is going to tell me how thick I need to make this cut. Now this one's a little harder to do because I'm not just running off the edge. So this one needs to be exact. So I sneak up on this one using this to measure. I sneak up on that cut to make sure that I get exactly the depth that I need on here. And I'm going to do the same thing I do where I'm going to mark off this top 1/4 inch and then X this out a little bit, just so I can say, okay, that's the material that needs to be removed. And it just, for me, any visual reminders are good because it's easy to get turned around and distracted when you're doing stuff, but this lets me know. And the other thing is, see, these cuts right here in the ends, so these cuts have to be on the same surface, the same face as this cut. So I know if this cut is face down on the table, this cut will be in the right spot, and the same goes for this one. All right, I'm gonna get this out of the way, and we're gonna start on this one. So generally, instead where I would work from the end and then work my way in, I'm not gonna do that on this one. I need to actually move this over a little bit. I need a little bit more table here, just about like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find like the left cutting side of this tooth. It would be the left for you, I don't know. It's my left. And I'm gonna find out where that actually touches that 14 3/4 mark. That's where I'll start this cut. And then I will work my way over to this line that I've done, but I will, as I get close, I'm gonna start checking it with the board so that I can really basically what you call sneak up on the cut. I don't wanna go too far. If it's too much, then I have I have an opening in there that this doesn't fit into, and then I have to figure out how I'm gonna fill that. So this is probably the most precise thing I do when I'm making these bases, besides the actual like length measurement and stuff. Okay. It's not super tight. I mean, there's a little bit of room to move it around in here. You can see it kind of is a little bit tight, but not super tight. And that's fine because, you know, when you put glue and stuff in here, the wood will swell just a little bit. But that's what I mean by a tight fit, is I want this joint right here to be pretty darn close. I don't want to have to smack it in with a hammer, but I want it to be not sloppy and loose and with a lot of room around it. So that's why I said you got to sneak up on that cut. And I usually go a little bit under what I know it's going to be. I check a measurement, then I'll take a tiny bit more off, and I check it. And if I do it 2 or 3 times, I'll do it 2 or 3 times. It doesn't matter, as long as I get it right the first time. All right, and then this one, where's my mark? Is right here. Okay. So I will, once again, I start it in the same place, and then I work out towards that outside line. But I use the actual blade tooth to determine that first mark there. Also, I will, most of the time you see me pushing on the handle back here behind it, so I've got my handle in the back, and then I'm holding it here and I'm pushing through. When I do these, I'm holding it on both sides. My thumb's not right here. I mean, the blade goes through here, so my thumb's here, so it's fine. The other piece is right here holding it. But the reason is, if I'm just holding it here, if I'm just chewing off the end, it's no big deal if it slips a little bit. But when I'm doing it this way, I need it precise and straight through. I'm gonna hold it from both sides, and that gives me the best amount of traction to keep this thing from sliding and moving, and gives me a much more accurate cut. Let me just check that starting point again. All right, let's do this one. Okay, so here's also a very interesting fact. Because these things are cut very precisely, if my wood is not the exact, like to the 1,000th of an inch thickness on each side, this side, you notice, fits really nicely. This side is a little too thick. So now I have to figure out, okay, if this one's gonna work, does this board work this way? If it fits this one, which it does, now we're good. So now you can see this is how it looks. This is how it works. I'm going to widen out just a little bit so you can see. Let's go a little bit wider here. So you can see the whole thing put together. And then this board gets cut down. So I don't care if it's taller on one end than the other or whatever. I don't give a crap about that, pardon my French, because I really don't care. All I care is that it fits. I'm going to take an end piece here, and we'll take an end piece here. We kind of have to spread them apart a little bit, but that's the way it works. And this is how it actually all comes together. Why is that kind of goofy? Now this is let me turn it this way, because this is not how it comes together. This is how it comes together. It's like this. There we go. Put my handles in the right sides. And the reason I know that is because my logo, turn it this way, the logo's on this side and it's face up here, and that's the way it needs to go. But my handles are down, so my handles are at the bottom. The logos are here, and then I've got, that's really short right there. And then I've got this this centerpiece right here, and that will be the side storage compartment, and that'll be the main compartment for the machine. So there you go. That is how I do those, and you can see this. That's why this is so critical, because this measurement needs to be the exact size, and it is the exact same size as like this base right here with no storage compartment, they actually match up on the interiors just like that, because this one just has no side compartment. So it would have something that look like this. There you go. All right, hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, that is how I do the joinery on all of these in terms of cutting it. Now, are we done? No, we are not done, because we need to glue these together. And in order to glue them together, we have to sand them. My most favorite not thing to do. But as I said, sanding these is not too big of a deal because they get sanded to 150. And that's pretty much it. So I don't even start like at a low one. I start at like 120 and then I go to 150 and then that's it for the inside. I don't do extensive sanding and everything else because it's the inside, right? And even though everybody's like, you know, it doesn't matter. I mean, it matters enough that I want it to evenly take stain. So that's the big thing. What do we got? Sorry, I'm just now looking because I've been over at the thing. So I'm looking. And Freefall Clash over on Twitch said, one thing you've done is glue a sheet of thin, fine sandpaper to the board on a miter gauge. Oh, that's a good idea. So basically, what they're saying is that if you, on my miter gauge back here, if I take a piece of sandpaper and mount that to the back right here, what that would do is prevent, as I'm pushing it through, that would prevent the board from slipping because it's kind of the sandpaper grit is holding in place. That's actually a really good idea. I hadn't thought of that. And I might actually give that a try. What grit sandpaper do you use for that? Pray tell. I'm thinking probably something like a 150 or something would probably be fine. But that would probably work really well. But yeah, that's a good idea because that's the biggest key when you're cutting with a miter gauge is you don't want your wood to slip side to side. You want to keep it intact as you're pushing it through that blade. That's the one thing. And when you saw me doing that last cut, I went forward and backward with it, right, as I was cutting. But when I got out into that last cut where I wanted to make sure it was precisely at that right spot, I pushed it through, then I lifted the wood out of the workpiece and slid the miter back because I didn't want it cutting. Okay, 220, they use 220. I didn't want it cutting on the way back, which can happen if you slide it even like a little bit. It can cut on the way back and ruin your cut. So the bulk of the wood moved out, I just go back and forth. But when I get down to that last part, I'll push it through, lift it up, come back, and then measure and then push it through again if I need to. But yeah, I'm going to put some sandpaper on there. That's a really good tip. That's the tip of the day, sandpaper on your miter gauge. The other thing I've also found on miter gauges is, depending on the wood you use, is check your backer board for straightness, because over time, it's wood. If you're using wood, and wood changes shape over time, it can swell and do things. So I usually like to check mine with a straight edge every now and then, just to make sure that I'm still have a nice straight backer board, because that's not always the case. All right, what is this on here? So 150, pardon me. And I don't know if I have a 120 here that's ready to rock, possibly. 220, what is this? That's an 80. I'm looking at my piles over here that I've got. It's a 120. Are you a good 120? Not a bad 120. All right. I think I have a 120 here that's ready to roll. And I'm just going to clean this off. Ugh. So I do have to do some sanding on here. Unfortunately, like I said, it's one of those things that you kind of just have to do. But before I do any glue ups, I always try to make sure that I'm minimizing my work down the road. So I will hit these with some 120, some 150, and then they're ready for glue. I don't have to do this center board in here yet because it's going to go in a couple of steps later. I don't glue that piece in. That center piece does not get glued in yet. It's just cut the slot for size right now. So the only thing that gets glued are the end pieces and the middles, and we can sand those suckers down. Let's see, I've got my sander here. I've got some sandpaper on there. These are the other two that I've done. So what I might do is just kind of go through and just kind of, I'm just pulling all kinds of crap off my table here, aren't I? Not doing very well here. All right, hang on. I've got dust on my table, so I need to clean that up first. That's just rule number one. Clean the dust off. Yeah, the backer board can move over time, so you should check it periodically. Like I said, I've got a piece of oak on there. It's pretty good. It doesn't move really well, very much, but I have used pieces that have moved. I also do MDF. So MDF is pretty decent, very flat. MDF just gets kind of marked up over time. It doesn't take abuse as much as a nice piece of oak does. And that's quarter sawn white oak that I'm using on there. So quarter sawn is a much more stable cut. So it stays and keeps its shape a lot better than flat sawn stuff does. So I've got that going for me. All right, I'm gonna get my pencil here because that's just what I do, my little pencil trick here, and just draw pencil marks on the inside of my stuff here. So as I remove the pencil mark, I'm ready to move to the next grit. I need some ears. And then we're gonna do the most exciting part of the show today. We're gonna do a little sanding. So let me just go ahead and get this done, and then we can do some glue up. What do I do with my remote? I gotta say, I'm still disappointed in the orbital sanders that I've been getting. I got one that was what did I get? Uh, a rigid, and in this one, and they just don't seem to orbit. They just kind of, they're more vibrating and slightly turning. They're supposed to have like 2,000 orbits per minute. I don't see it. My last one that I had, which was a cheap skill one, it lasted for years, and that sucker spins like a bat out of hell. This one, not so great. Intermission music during noise. I could actually do that. I could do some intermission music. Wouldn't be that hard for me to do. I would just have to go over and do it. Anyway, this thing, I mean, when you turn it on, it looks like it's spinning. But as soon as it contacts wood, it just kind of does this little pivoty little thing where it may be orbiting, but it's not spinning. And I don't know if that's normal. Does anybody else know if that's normal in their tools? Because I swear to God, the one that I had prior to my skill would just spin. I mean, it orbited, it did the little oscillating thing, but it spun like crazy and did a really good job. This thing just, in the rigid I had before, it was almost the exact same thing. I know you were joking about the music, but I could do it. I probably should do it. Anyway, so if you all have different orbital sanders that you really like, that you that's not a Festool, because honestly, I don't have Festool money right now. I've been looking at getting a bigger sander, maybe a gear-driven sander. So Triton makes one. Rigid does make a gear-driven sander, which I would hope would be better than their smaller oscillating one. Who else has one? There's a couple of different ones I was looking at. I mean, obviously Festool has one, but I can't, like I said, I can't afford Festool. Can't really afford Merc either, because the Merc one is like it's like $600 for their sander. They start at 600 and they go up from there. So if you have a better sander, I would be happy to know what it was. I tried to find another skill, but they didn't have it because, well, Lowe's sucks now. Pardon my French, but they do. I guess I could get what are they? Craftsman, because that's what they sell now. They sell Craftsman crap. But anyway, I don't know if anybody else uses one that they're really happy with. I'm not super happy with this. It's not doing nearly the work that I want it to do. It takes a lot longer. I mean, my big goal here is to remove things like planer marks and stuff like that. But I don't know. We'll see. Let me do this. These are two smaller ones that I've got here, so they shouldn't take very long, and then we'll kind of keep moving here. What else? Yeah, that one. Yeah, the hickory is hard. It's really pretty. I mean, it's like, look at it. It's pretty. I mean, you've got that's sapwood and heartwood there, and it's a really piece of wood, pretty piece of wood. But it's really hard. Now, the thing is, when you sand down hardwood, it feels really silky smooth too. So, uh, okay, so you got a DeWalt that, see, I haven't gotten a DeWalt yet, and because they didn't have one in stock, and I was going to order one, and I was like, ah, should I really do that? I mean, it's a little more expensive, but honestly, at this point, I don't really care about a little bit more expensive. 15-year-old DeWalt. See, but that's the thing. That's like my skill. My skill saw was, or my skill sander was probably 6 or 7 years old. I mean, it was like a $40 thing too. It wasn't that much, but it just lasted and it did the job. And I think basically what happened on that one was that I basically wore out the brushes on it. Um, if I was more of an electrical type person, I would go and try to see about replacing the brushes on there, but my time is worth a little bit more than that. So I think at this point I would probably just replace it, but it definitely, you know, it's not sparks, but it's kind of doing crazy, weird things. So I needed to move on, but I don't know, man. I'm super disappointed in the Rigid and the Ryobi. I thought the Rigid was just I got a bum one or whatever. But I have to say that I moved this one. It's doing the exact same thing. I mean, it turns, but super slow. I'm not getting RPMs on here, and to me, that's the whole point of an oscillating sander, is that you get RPMs, but it moves in not a straight circle. It kind of oscillates around so that you're getting a more random circular pattern in there, which kind of keeps you from getting marks, you know, while you're sanding. But this is stupid. So I definitely need to go with something different here. Why did your real name pop up? I don't see your real name. I didn't see it, so if it did, it doesn't show up. I think it just shows up for you. This is over on Twitch for anybody who's watching. So if your name popped up, it wasn't, I didn't see it. I think that's something that you saw on screen, not something that I see, because I didn't see. The only thing I see is spoiler 507 on my screen. So, but hey, thanks for subscribing. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think that's a Twitch thing where it pops up your information for yourself, but there's nothing in the chat that has your name in there. Yeah, I'm looking through the whole chat. There's nothing in there. So never fear, you're still anonymous. I tell you, I'm not a big Ryobi guy, but I will show you real quick. One thing I got, which I really love, which is a Ryobi, is this bad boy right here. So this is a pin nailer, or a brad nailer. I love this thing, and it's an airless, no tube kind of brad nailer. It'll go from a 5/8 inch to a 2-inch brad nail, and this thing is awesome, and it's battery powered. So I love this. This is a Ryobi, and I got that because at the time my air compressor was kind of garbage. Now I did replace it with a newer one, but I also wanted to have the freedom to move around as I was using a brad nail. Because a lot of times I use brad nailer if I'm making bigger cabinets and things like that, and I like to, you know, when I'm doing a glue up on the back of a cabinet or whatever, I use brad nails to hold it in when I'm gluing. And I like the freedom of not having to drag a cord around. So that thing is great though. This, not thrilled. Not so much. All right, I need to get this one done. What time is it? 104. I'll tell you, this, I'm not going to do any more sanding on this. That is glassy smooth. I might hit the walnut a little bit more. Let me do this oak real quick. I say real quick, like this is going to do it quickly. Oh, well, that's not bad for 120. I mean, it feels pretty good. Um, so you said you had old rigid tools. I've got actually my, if you look like way over there in the corner, back that direction, right down there is my, that is my jointer, which is a 6-inch jointer. That's a rigid, and it's probably, I want to say 25 years old or so. I got that from a gentleman who used to make his own arrows and such. Anyway, but yeah, that I bought that from him on Craigslist, and he loved it, and I still am using it and love it. It's great. So yeah, older tools, I think, you know, there was more individuality between older tools, like they were made in different factories to different design specs and everything else. Whereas now, I think most everything you buy now, there are some exceptions like, you know, Festool and things like that. They are their own companies. They're making their own tools. They're making their other stuff. But stuff like this, Rigid, Craftsman, some of the other, even some of the other lines of tools, they're all the same tool, just rebranded. They're all being made in the same factories overseas. I know this for a fact because my brother-in-law used to work for a tool manufacturing company that, you know, he'd go to meetings in China and South America and all around the world. And they were making these major brand tools, but basically they would just be rebranded and sold. And so they would change some of the functionality and decorative things and buttons and like that, but the mechanics and the guts and the way they work were all the same. So I think at that point, I mean, it's kind of like washing machines, like for clothes, right? Did you know there's only like 2 companies now that make washing machines? I think that's what it is. Last time I looked, I think it's like 2 companies that make washing machines. Now, there's a lot more than 2 companies that actually sell washing machines under different labels, but there's really, I think, only like 2, maybe 3 companies that manufacture washing machines anymore. And they're all just rebranded. There's no Maytag. Maytag doesn't exist anymore as a manufacturing company. They're now making the same machines that GE makes and the same machines that Kenmore makes. All of them are made in the same factory and rebranded, and, you know, some cosmetic changes. It's all the same machine. So I think tools have kind of come that same way, that you're really not able to get as much individuality in a tool. It's like my planer. I've got a planer that is it was made and purchased at Harbor Freight, and it's a what do they call it, a Chicago something or whatever their house brand used to be. They got a new house brand now, but if you go and look at the actual physical size, dimensions, specs, and everything of that machine that I've got, and then you compare it to other major manufacturers of machines, they're exactly the same. They look exactly the same. They have the same stuff. You could take the blades from one and put it in the other. They're the same machine. The price difference may go from $100 difference. So you're paying for that name, but you're not really paying for quality anymore, which is kind of sad. But that's just kind of the way things are in terms of the way things are manufactured anymore. I'm going to run these really quickly through some 150. I don't really need a whole lot here. The walnut more than anything. These two cleaned up really nicely, and I don't see any planer marks on them. That's one of the things I look for, is I'm checking the glare and the light to see if I have any planer marks on here. Because really that's what I'm looking to do, is get rid of machining marks on these things, so that when I do slap some stain or whatever, I think I'm going to stain. I ordered some stain for this hickory, and we're gonna see how that looks. We'll do a test piece. I've got some test pieces here that we can throw some stain on later on. But I just want to get rid of machine marks for the inside. So I'm going to run these really quickly. I'm not even going to do the pencil thing. I'm just going to hit them real fast. And then we're going to go over to the table and glue a couple of these up. And I'll show you how I kind of do my clamping process. And then we will call it a day. So anyway, yeah, people wonder why there's supply chain issues. And you're right, because everything's coming from the same place, and you have, it's like one roadblock kills the entire supply chain, right? It's like, look at computer chips. And by the way, all this crap has computer chips in it too. So, you know, it just doesn't affect cars and computers and stuff. It's like, yeah, my headphones, there's a computer chip in there, and my cell phone and my iPad and all the stuff that takes chips, right? And I read something yesterday. They make on average 2 trillion computer chips a year are made. That's incredible. When you think of how much, how many computer chips there are. And so, yeah, one screw up and now I will say that there's actually a place right near me. I'm in Manassas, Virginia, and Micron is actually in Manassas. They're one of their major manufacturing plants are here, and they're actually looking at expanding and adding more chip making. So that's kind of nice. I'll have a chip manufacturer in my backyard. I don't know if that'll make my supply chain issues any better, but it is nice to know that at least some places are ramping up and trying to redistribute that supply chain. And I think, like you said, if nothing else, what's happened over the past 1.5 to 2 years has, on a global scale, made the world kind of realize that, holy crap, we can't just always go to the same source. We need to diversify in our supply chain, just like we diversify in everything else. So one can only hope. Anyway, let me get this done real quick, because this won't take me long. I'm just going to smooth these out really fast. Not even half the amount of time that I spent doing it the last one. So let's go ahead and do this real fast. All right, that's enough of that nonsense. The only thing I am going to do is I'm going to put this pad that I just used, which is a 150, and I'm going to put that on my sanding mouse pad here, which I love this little thing. And all I'm going to do is take it and run it up and down the length of the grain here, just to kind of make sure that if there were any swirly marks, that they are, for the most part, negated. So I'm just running with the grain, and then that will hopefully give me a better finish. There's a lot of people that only finish to 150, especially if they're putting top coats on. And I've heard people say, oh, well, you know, the stain, the wood takes the stain better if you don't sand it as smoothly and other stuff. I don't know if that's true or not. I did an experiment where I sanded a piece of wood to different grit numbers from like 150 up to 400. And honestly, then I stained them all the exact same way. I didn't notice any difference in the stain. It all looked exactly the same. So I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but I didn't notice any result of different staining on it. Now, I will say that if I'm using an oil finish, like I will be using on this walnut when I'm done with it, that oil finish will be finished to a higher degree than I would if I was going to be using a lacquer, because I'm more depending on the surface of the wood for smoothness than I am about 6 coats of lacquer. So I really need, because the oil soaks into the wood and you're still pretty much dealing with that wood surface. So in that respect, I will go finer, because I'll use Danish oil on the walnut piece there. I use a dark walnut Danish oil, and it really brings out, oil just kind of brings the wood grain alive. At least that's what I think. I think that looks awesome. So, but anyway, let me just get a little last second grain smoothing here. And then we will go over to the table saw, because that's where I do my glue up, because I use the cast iron surface as a nice flat, stable place for me to assemble the boxes.
And I could use my table here that I'm on right now, but I need to re-level this thing. It's seen a lot of use over the past few years, so. All right. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to dust these off. I'm going to get my vacuum and my little dusty brush, and I'm just going to dust the sawdust out of the grain here real quickly. And if you ever finish sanding and your stuff doesn't feel super smooth, try taking your dust hose and sucking it off, or getting a stiff brush like this and just kind of knock all the dust out, because you probably have dust kind of piled up in the grain and it keeps it from feeling smooth. It's probably much smoother than you think it is. All right, so now I'm going to move over. Let me move my table over here and move my computer out of the way a little bit here. You sand to 400, but you don't do production. I mean, you know, sanding's a personal preference. It really is. Like I said, some things I will sand to 400, like that walnut base that I'm getting ready to glue up. I will do that to 400 because a lot of it, like I said, depends on the finish I'm putting on. I found that for a lacquer finish, as long as I have all of the marks out of the wood itself, so that all you're seeing is grain, then I'm happy with that result. Because to me, it's more about, it's about the touch. It's about how it feels. I am very tactile in my process. Like I like wood that feels like wood. I don't like wood that feels like plastic or anything else. I like my stuff to feel really, you know, feel that grain and everything else, which I think is one of the reasons why I like oak, because oak is such the grain is so tactile in oak. But like I said, it depends. Like I don't use a glossy finish. I use a semi-gloss because I'm just not a glossy, plasticky kind of guy. So I'm just kind of getting these things set up, and then I'm going to move them to the side. And I'm going to figure out, now oh, you can't see me. Ah, there we go. That's better. Okay, I'm getting these set up. Here's my clamps over here. And I'm going to set these up so that I have them oriented in the correct direction. So this is going to be a handle face down and a handle face down. This is facing up right now, so I'm going to lay it down this way. And this is the top of this one, so I'm going to lay it down this way. And then really all I need is my glue and a paper towel. I will clamp these in two different directions. Basically, ooh, a little oil there. Basically what I'm looking at is getting really good coverage on both sides of this rabbet joint right here. And that will in turn make good contact with the wood surfaces here. So what I'm going to do is put a bead of, once I open it, I'm going to put a bead of glue down here. This is just Titebond 2. I don't get obsessive about my glue. Titebond has always just been my go-to. And I have used Titebond 3. You know, when I was watching all the YouTube videos and like, oh, for your cutting boards, you need to use Titebond 3 because it's waterproof and blah, blah, blah. I bought into that for a little while, but I haven't really, I then switched back to 2 and did some more cutting boards and never had a cutting board failure using Titebond 2. My cutting boards don't get that wet. Now, if you're doing outside stuff, I think 3 is really important because it is waterproof, and if you have stuff that is going to be getting wet a lot, well, that probably makes a big difference then. So, all right. So these are, like I said, the times where I need to make sure that I'm doing things correctly and having things oriented the right way. Like I have a logo on one of these, on this side of this. I need to make sure when I glue this that that logo is not upside down in relation to the handles, because that would look stupid. And I say this because I've done it and I know what stupid looks like. So I look at this and there's my logo face up, so I know my handles are this way. So when I turn everything up, they will be oriented the correct way. I have made so many glue up mistakes on these things in the past. Hopefully I'm beyond that now, but I am also super paranoid that I check everything like 2 or 3 times now. It's kind of like measurements, you know? So make sure my handles are down here. Make sure my logo is facing up. The back doesn't really matter, but I do have an orientation mark on there, so I kind of have a direction I want it to go as well. And this is why I use my my tabletop here, because it is very flat, so I can get everything. If I get everything kind of square and flat at this point as I'm gluing up, it's less planing and such I have to do to get these leveled out down the road. So then what I will do is take a clamp and just temporarily apply some pressure so that I'm pushing in on these sideboards here and holding them in place. I'm gonna clamp in that location again, but I will re-clamp it. I will readjust these, but for right now I just need these to be holding everything in place so I can get the long clamps underneath them. So this is just the way I found to do it that makes it a little bit easier. And so if I put pressure on these sideboards, then I can lift it up like this and everything stays in place. So then what I will do is slide my long clamps under, which these are Bessie's. There's other companies that make these, but these are parallel clamps. So as I tighten it down, this face and the face back here stay parallel to each other and you get nice even clamping pressure. And so that's why I love these. These are the Revos, I think. They're not cheap. I will tell you that, you know, there's not a lot of clamps I'll spend big money on, but this is one of them I do because it's worth it. There's some other companies that make similar ones, but this is just the ones that I've always kind of gravitated to. I got my first set of these at a woodworking show, and they were like a really good deal. And so I've bought a couple more since then. And Bessie makes really good clamps, they do. All right, so now I've got pressure from the parallel clamps pushing in. You notice that there's an edge right here. I'm not going all the way to the edge of this piece of wood. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm not going all the way, let me point, to this piece of wood right here. I'm leaving that edge that didn't get cut. I'm leaving that outside of this clamp, and the same on this side, and then the same back here. All I want to do is force these end pieces in. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm going to reclamp the sides now and go up and down like this and try to get good clamping pressure this direction. So I'm trying to get a clamping along this surface and then clamping along this surface. And the better job I do now, the less squaring up problems I have to do down the road. There we go. And I like to see a little bit of squeeze out. I go pretty easy on the glue here, but there should be a teeny bit of squeeze out on these things. And then I can just kind of give these a little bit more of a squeeze like this. And then that's pretty much it. So you can see that's the base and the clamps. And I will leave these in for multiple hours. I don't shy away from clamp time because to me that's the most important thing. So minimum 4 hours, but typically I go overnight sometimes. With these I may do another set because I only have 3 sets of clamps for these Revos. I only can do 3 glue ups at a time. That's why we're doing 3 right now. But I can only do 3 at a time. And that means basically I kind of stagger these across a couple of days to get them all done, depending on how many I'm making. All right, let's get this oriented. So that would be up that way, and this would be up this way, and then handle down and out, and handle down and out. There we go. So this is set up. So I'll flip these down and do my glue bottle again, and check my comments. Yeah, Bessie clamps are awesome. I also have some smaller ones that are like F-style Bessie clamps, and I'll actually break some of those out here in a minute because I think I need some of those. But the Bessie clamps are really, you talk about like well-made tools. Bessie has very well-made tools. I know there's like, I think it's Jorgensen, which makes pretty good ones too, but I've just kind of gravitated to the Bessies, and never disappointed in a Bessie tool buy, I will say that. I have a whole bunch of the smaller, the 6-inch F clamps. I use those all the time. I use those. They are great. But yeah, I just wish the Revos weren't so expensive. These clamps right here, depending on when you catch them, sometimes if you catch them on sale, it's not too bad, but they'll run you anywhere from 45 to 55 bucks a piece. So they are not cheap, but you know, they say, oh, you get what you pay for. When it comes to clamps, sometimes that's true. I do have some cheap like aluminum bar clamps and stuff, so depending on what I'm doing, they serve the purpose. But when I need to do really good parallel clamping, just nothing beats my Bessie. So, all right, this one's about done. I mean, you can see the glue up on this is not really hard. The biggest thing for me is to keep it square. I didn't really check that last one, but it's so small, it's not really an issue. But once they start getting larger, I really start checking them internally for square. And if need be, I will put a clamp caddy corner to kind of bring it back into square. It doesn't happen very often, but anyway, let me check. That side is up correctly. And all right, let's get all these together. And I mean, the nice thing is the way that these rabbet joints are, it kind of squares everything up as you press things in. So it's not too bad, but let me go here. I've got now these are Jorgensen clamps right here. These are called gear clamps. So these are pretty good. I have pretty good success with these. A lot of clamping pressure with these particular ones. So I'm just going to go ahead and clamp this really quickly right here. Just put a little pressure. A lot of clamping pressure with these things, and it doesn't require a lot of force. That's why I like them. I use these quite a bit to clamp things to my workbench because they do have a really nice wide mouth to them. There we go. All right. Now I can lift these up onto these clamps and then push these in. And let's get that lined up. Like I said, I don't go to I'm clamping inside of the face of this 1/4-inch piece of wood on the end there. And just kind of solid there. Same on this one. Now the one thing I can do is take like I've got my little woodpecker square here, and I can put that inside and just run along and make sure that my corners, just go to the opposite corners, and just make sure that everything's square in here. And they are pretty darn square. Because if you glue it out of square, you're kind of little hose. Now this corner is off just a little bit. So if I can loosen this up, that's going to help a little bit. The only problem with like doing the catty corners, you got to get a clamp that's long enough to take care of that, which is not always easy to do. All right, I think this looks pretty good. Get this square and we'll put some pressure here. Did that slide up? So here's the other problem is sometimes if your boards slide off, that's just something you're going to have to fix later. So I'm going to loosen these clamps and I'm going to try to get this back down because it slid just a little bit. Oh, and that glue, believe it or not, has kind of set up there. Let's see if we can do it this way. Up here. That got it. There we go. Now it's squared up. It's kind of a pain, but I tell you, the more time I take now to make sure that my boards are nice and, like I said, square and flush and not sliding around on me, the less work I do down the road. All right, I'm going to get this one in there and pressed and then reset this clamp right here. The only thing I've done with these particular clamps, because they do have such pinpoint pressure, is if I notice I'm not getting good, if it's pushing more on one end than the other, sometimes I'll take a piece of wood and put it on the sides here and basically make clamping calls. So I'll do something like, well, here, I can show you. So I'll take a couple of pieces of wood like this, put them here, take this board or take this clamp, and as I clamp this way, I'm getting even pressure because the wood is distributing that force across the face of the board here and not concentrating it in the one point where it's pressing against. This looks pretty good though. Let me tighten these down and check the underside to make sure. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do the thing on this side too, because I notice I've got a little gap down here, and that gap is due to the fact that I'm not getting pressure across the entire surface there. So let's try this again. And now let me see if that gap closed up. Yep, much better. So no gaps, but that's, once again, that's my process. That's pretty good for squareness. I've got one more to do here. And this is the longer one. So this one, what I found when I'm doing these really long ones, is that because they are so long and I'm using these parallel clamps, there is a tendency sometimes for the pressure of the parallel clamps to bow the wood outwards. All right, so I'm gonna get this one into this one. That's about right. So they do bow out sometimes just because I need that parallel pressure clamp, or that clamping pressure from the parallel clamps to push in, that it does force the wood to bow out slightly. And you don't want that because after 5 or 6 hours of the wood bowing out, it'll stay bowed out. So. All right, this is where I normally screw up, is when I'm doing these bases. I have screwed them up where I've done them like this. Did anybody see what's wrong with this picture? Well, I've got one dado slot here and one here. They're not lined up. So that would be bad. I've done it before. This, not bad. So that's the way this needs to go. Okay, handle outside here and down. So flip these down. Yeah, so basically what I will do is when I clamp this together, I will get the board that will be sitting in the middle. I will put that, I will not insert it all the way. I'll insert it partially into the slot, and then I'll put a clamp across there to keep these from bowing out. And that usually does a pretty good job. Usually. Check messages here. I've got a lot, so you were saying pipe clamps. I love pipe clamps. Pipe clamps are really awesome, especially if you do things like panel glue ups and stuff, or if you're making cutting boards and such. Anytime I'm doing like panel glue ups and stuff, I love them. They're versatile because you can always change the length of pipe. I use the 1/2 inch pipes, but I do have a couple of the 3/4 inch pipes. They're massive. And if you need some sturdy clamping, man, a 3/4 inch pipe clamp, forget about it. You are not budging that sucker. It is stout. And they're usually really good, even clamping pressure from side to side. So yeah, the pipe clamps are really nice and they're not crazy expensive. The big thing is, so you buy the clamp end. When you buy a pipe clamp, it doesn't come with a pipe. It just comes with the clamp, and then you buy the length of pipe. And usually it's threaded pipe, so the pipe has threads on each end, and you just thread the clamp on one end, and then the other end of the clamp just slides up. And so if you've never seen one, here is, so you can see what we're talking about. This is a pipe clamp right here. And this one actually came a little loose. So it threads onto this end. So you can see right here, there's threads. You don't use the threads on this end though. You just use the threads on this end, which is what this attaches to. And then you slide, this has a little spring right here, and you can slide this and set it to whatever distance you need. And then this has a great little, basically like a press right here that pushes that end in, and you get super good clamping pressure with these things. I love my pipe clamps. I have probably a 6 of them. And because like I said, especially early on, I was doing a lot of cutting boards, and they are fantastic for cutting boards. And usually for each cutting board, I would use 2 or 3 of them, at least 3, maybe 4 sometimes on a cutting board. So they work really well for that. All right, let me make sure I don't screw this up and get everything. That's right side up, 2 dados facing each other, handle side down and down. All right, everybody's in the right spot. That's the big problem to start with. And I actually am going to get my my other, did I bring them over already? Yeah, I already brought them. So here's my large, these are larger Bessie F-style clamps, so I will use these sometime. And I'm going to use them the same way. Right now I'm just going to lock this down, but I am going to probably put clamping cauls on here, just because you're only clamping in this area and this area. It's not a lot of pressure. And sometimes you need to distribute that pressure across a larger surface. So for right now, all I'm trying to do is hold these in place until I can get the Bessie clamps underneath, the large parallel clamps in place. Okay. But yeah, these, this was actually a bundle. I got these and a couple of large 6-inch F-style clamps at Home Depot for like 25 bucks, which I thought was a really good deal. Oh, this needs to be a little longer. This one needs to be a little longer. There we go. Okay. All right, now we're working here. Set this one up. Spot and get some pressure here. And we'll fix this one. So much like the pipe clamps kind of thing, the one end of the pressure clamp or the parallel clamp doesn't move, and the head with the clamping pressure is what you lower to your surface. So this is the part down here that always moves. This is always static. It doesn't move and slide. So you get this set, and then as you start tightening this, it should, then it comes into square in terms of being parallel to the other side, and then you can get your pressure going. That's good. And then, like I said, I will check this for square, but I can usually tell if I'm bowing too much. You can usually see a little bit of the bowing. It's not too bad. I've got a little bit on here. There's a little bit of bowing on this. So I will take this and insert it into here. Like I said, I'm not going all the way in, and I don't know if that's the right side. Hang on a second. Let's try it this way. No, definitely this way. Definitely this way. This way. One of these ways. There we go. Okay. So I've got this setting in there. That gives me my width that it needs to be. And then I will take one more clamp here. And I've got another one of these quick grips. And I'm just going to push these boards in. And that brings it back in. So that forces those sides back in and then really brings it into square. And that's pretty much perfect now. Pretty much. Yep. Because you really, I mean, honestly, you just want to make sure that you're not having these things being warped out. And I'm actually going to clamp it here in the middle a little bit more, just to kind of force those sides in. But it won't go beyond this point. This is going to keep it from going any further. But the longer you have boards in a warped position and you leave them that way, the harder it will be to get them out of that warped position. All right, I'm going to use some clamping cauls on these sides. I'm going to reclamp these. And that way I am distributing that clamping force as best I can across the surface. And this is where it really saves my butt in doing these little tiny steps, because anything more, I mean, I can not do these things, but honestly, I'm usually fixing little errors and little openings and gaps and stuff if I don't do this now. So I'm just looking for a scrap. Actually, looking in the wrong place. Here's a scrap right here. Nice and flat. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. And just putting this here as a clamping caul. This is something I've actually started doing recently. I didn't used to always do this, but I found that when I did try this, I actually had better success and more successful gluing by doing it this way. And like I said, all I'm doing is distributing that pressure across a larger surface, and it just gives you better clamping. And the thing is, you have to remember, I'm gluing kind of a lot of this is ingrained, so anything I can do to improve the ingrained gluing, I'm going to do it. All right, that's that. I've got 3 of these end clamps now, and I'm just going to leave them there for several hours. And what I will do is I will start prepping the other boards. I'll do all the, uh-oh. I actually turned my sander on with my foot. That was weird. I'm going to do the sanding and such for the other bases. I've got 5 more that need sanding on the interiors. So I will get those sanded, and then as I can free up clamps over here once they've had ample gluing time, like I might get another set into clamps this evening. I doubt it, because it's kind of nice outside, and I'm probably going to go ride my bike this evening and do some other stuff, so probably not going to do it today. But I can take them out first thing in the morning, put some in, and then by tomorrow afternoon, I can take them out and put the other ones back in, so that by the end of the day tomorrow, I will have all 8 of them set up and clamped and glued and ready to roll. So the next steps after that are, well, what's next after that? For the ones that, well, for all of them, we're going to have to make sure that first that they're flat on the bottom, which is why I use the table saw to start with. But we want to make sure that we've got a very flat bottom surface, because I'm going to use a rabbeting bit. I think I've got it over here. Yep. So I've got a 1/4 inch rabbeting bit. A lot of rabbet stuff on these bases. I should just call them rabbet boxes. But anyway, so this is a 1/4 inch rabbeting bit. I will run this around the interior underside of the base. So it'll come in here and take off a 1/4 inch piece about 1/4 of an inch deep, and that will create a ledge or a shelf on the inside for me to cut some plywood and make bottoms for the boxes. So that's basically the next step, is to create those bottoms and put them in there. After that, what else comes after that? I will need, I'm going to need to make corners. So I need to make, well, they look like this. So I need to make little corner pieces that look like this. There's basically triangular pieces of wood. And they get glued into the corners of the box, and that is the support for the sewing machine. So just little corner pieces like this. I found that these work really well. The only problem is I need to have wood that works well, is a good thickness, and allows me to make some of these diagonal cuts in it. So I have to find some wood for that. Shouldn't be too hard. But we need to do the bottoms, we need to do corners, and then we can move on to the ones that have the lids. I've already cut the pieces down, so we have thinner pieces, but these will need to be refined so that they are probably going to be much thinner. That also means that I will use the rabbet bit to cut along the interior of the top of the base, where the side section is. I use that rabbet bit and cut a ledge in there so that when I cut those lids to size, they fit flush. So that's kind of the next process. After that, it's all sanding and finishing and put some finish on them, right? So it sounds really simple. There's a lot of little steps involved. So it's you know, it's a process. Figured out my production time per box. I have not figured out the production time per box, but generally, and there's two reasons for that. One is I make them here on stream. So I kind of fit the process to what I'm doing on stream. And if I have to wait a little bit so that I can share it with you all, I do that. And then the other thing is I usually batch them out. So I never make just one. I'm always making multiples, because that is a much more efficient use of my time. If I'm making one, it's just as easy for me to make 5 or 6, and it just depends on my lumber supply at the time. But I usually never make less than 5 or 6 at a time. And that is because I'm trying to maximize my production time. If I'm gonna make one cut, I might as well make 6 of the same cut, right? And that's kind of what I've been doing here, is I'm doing the same thing multiple times over and over again. Whereas if I had to go from starting to ending, my costs would be through the roof. And I try to keep the cost down to pass it along. Right now, my bases are still pretty expensive. I mean, I'm charging usually about, I think between $100 to $135, depending on the wood species and how much, if it has a storage and if I've done a carving on it. Those usually take the prices up, and if it's you know, like, you know, a premium piece of wood like walnut or something like that. So, but usually between $100 to $135 is my cost on one of the bases. And if I was doing these individually, it would be like a $400 base. But because I'm doing multiples, I can stretch that cost out across multiple bases, and that brings the cost way down. Time-wise, it's also hard to figure out because there's a lot of sit and wait time. There's a lot of glue time for stuff like this. The time that I'm on the CNC machine, like it takes a half an hour to carve a logo, but I'm not sitting there just watching it for half an hour. I'm doing other things. That's the beauty of the CNC, is I set it up and go. It's like having a partner who's working next to you. So that kind of works into the point where I can be doing other things while those parts of it are getting done. So it's kind of hard to calculate that in terms of time. I would say if I had to run straight through and do a box, it would probably minus the glue time, because glue time I can't, you know, that's a whole day, or at least 6 to 8 hours of glue time, right? So I would subtract that out. Typically, time that I would be hands-on with the box is probably about 4 to 5 hours, I would say, give or take. It seems longer on stream because I am doing multiples, but when you take what I'm doing and stretch it out across, you know, 6 to 8 bases, it brings that cost down. So that's why I always work in batches. And I did that when I was doing cutting boards. I would make batches of cutting boards. I would never just make one cutting board. I did recently, but that was just because it was a scrap wood fun project. But if I was making them to sell, I would never make just one, because that is a totally inefficient use of time. I would buy enough wood, calculate it out, to make at least 5 or 6 of them. And then that's where all the pipe clamps and everything else comes into play. It's easier if you're making one cut to make 6 cuts or make 8 cuts. And so that's the way I've always thought of it. There are people who do not do that and work very meticulously on one piece. And, you know, that's their way of doing it. Mine has always been try to, if I'm going to be out here doing it, I do it for fun. Now, here's the other thing. I'm not doing this to live off this money. I'm not paying rent or anything else. I'm retired. I have an income already. And so this is something that I do to, A, because I really love woodworking, B, because it allows me to fund new toys and tools and things like that, and pay for, you know, my long bike rides and things like that. So I'm using it as a supplemental income. And also because I'm providing a service that the things that I make, you can't buy elsewhere. There are very few people making these things. So I'm just putting things back into the community. My wife is very involved in the antique sewing machine community. She's a collector and a restorer of machines and a user of antique sewing machines. So that kind of got me into it in the first place. And because I understand the need, and I get people who are desperate, who are like, please, I really need a base. It's like, there's a huge need. So even though, yes, I'm charging money for this stuff and everything else, I also feel like I'm kind of giving things to the community by supplying these. So it's, you know, it is what it is. CNC is definitely nice. I have what's called a medium size. So it's 750 by 750 millimeter. They do not make this size anymore. They make a 500 by 500 and a 1000 by 1000. They got rid of this mid size. I have no idea why, because to me, this is the perfect size. And I don't know why they got rid of this size. They now make much more professional machines at Inventables, and they push those. But there's other people who make CNC machines, and it's a little bit of an investment to get into, but I've already recouped any money I spent on this. I think I spent maybe 1,500 bucks on this back when I bought it, and I've more than recouped that money from this thing, from different projects I've made and sold. And you know, you're basically bound by your imagination and your time to learn how to use it, because there's so many different things you can make with a CNC machine. So I always say that if you've got the time and you want to make the investment, it's one of those things that will pay for itself over time. So it's not like buying a tool that you never use. It's like, that's why I have problems justifying buying like a Festool. Like I could buy like a Festool compound miter saw, right? But why would I want to spend $2,000 on something that really I'm not going to utilize to the point where I'm getting a return on my investment, and it's really not going to do much more. It has better dust collection than mine, but that's about it. So to me, it's like it really needs to pay the bills when I buy something. I would love to have a laser. Laser is, you know, one of those things I've looked at and looked at. If I get a laser, I want to get a big laser. I don't want to get a tabletop one necessarily. I'd like to get one that's a little bit larger. I can do larger pieces in there. But it's hard to justify the cost. I mean, a good tabletop laser is going to run you about $3 grand. A larger cabinet style one, minimum. If you look up Boss Laser, and you can look, and they've got one that's like 14 by 24 inches. It's like $5 grand for the laser. So things like that are like, oh, that would really have to pay for itself. But I have a couple of friends who have lasers, and they are always busy, and they're always making things, and they're etching things, and they're doing great stuff with them. So, you know, to me, there's also like, do I have time to learn how to use this stuff too? Because it took me a little while. That's why I like this one. This CNC machine was great because the learning curve for the software was not that hard. There is other software that people use like VCarve Pro and stuff, and Aspire, which are much more capable carving software programs, but they're really expensive, like between like $500 to I think like over $1,000 for the Aspire. And the learning curve on them is pretty steep in terms of learning how to use them, especially in conjunction with your tools. So I like this because it was really simple to use. It was really easy to get into. There's a lot of videos, and for me, it's really a helpful thing. Videos are awesome. But anyway, wow. Well, my computer's about to run out. My microphone battery is about to run out. I've been on stream for about 3 hours now, which is a lot longer than I was planning, but it was fun, and I'm glad you all stopped in. So if you just subscribed, thank you very much for subscribing today or following my channel and stuff like that. And don't die, little computer. Yeah, I will be back here again on Wednesday at 11 o'clock. So if you're around, please come back, join me on the stream. We'll do some more fun stuff. Everything will be out of clamps by then, and we'll move on to the next process and maximize our efficiency to maximize our profits or something like that. You know, weird. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Had good conversations with everybody today. And you all take care. I will see you back here on Wednesday.